All right, welcome back to Three Raptures, Part 5. Just want to apologize that last one went a little long, but it was one whole complete section on the 24 elders, and it was the big bombshell that blew me away. Got about, I don't know, I got a bunch more proofs, but we're going to continue on, and I'm going to digress a little bit into a mid-trib theory for just a skosh for those of you who have that question, because I did have it in my mind and some stuff came up. So we'll go ahead and get into this mid-trib theory. Like I say, I'm not endorsing it, but if somebody else has more stuff to put with this and they can prove something, there's possibly another shot out and a fourth rapture. Hey, okay. Before we get into more pre-trib scriptures, first I want to go down a rabbit trail just to touch a little bit on the mid-trib theory, rapture theory. There is a possibility here that I will explain. In chapter 11, the temple gets measured, but not the outside court area. It is to be for the Gentiles 42 months. But the court which is without the temple leave out and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall tread under 40. The holy city shall they tread underfoot 42 months. The very next verse gives us the two witnesses who are given power for 1260 days. And I will give power unto my two witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1260 days, clothed in sackcloth. And this period, although stated differently, is again 42 months. So we have the 42 months of the two witnesses, temple given to the Gentiles, followed by the 42 months where the devil is at war with the woman's seed in chapter 12. Except that the time is shortened, lest no flesh will survive. We will bring that up later. Well, the two witnesses turn water to blood and smite with plagues as often as they want. The beast kills them. They lie in the street 3.5 days, after doing what they did for 3.5 years. And then I heard a great voice from heaven saying unto them, Come up hither. And they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them. This is very similar to John being called up hither as well. They were brought up to heaven after they were given life again and stood on their feet. So in chapter 11, we have another instance of people being called up into heaven via a rapture, not a resurrection. We also know that Elijah and Enoch were also taken up to heaven, raptured, while they were still alive. Two more separate raptures, and Elijah will return before the day of the Lord, which we learned is after the 1,000-year reign. Behold, I will send you Elijah, the prophet, before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. So sometime Elijah's coming back. Okay, sometime, we don't know when, between now and the end, he's coming back. Therefore, I believe that Elijah is one of the two witnesses in the Great Tribulation. Now, some people might take this come up hither as a rapture and a symbol of the church going up after the first 42 months with these two witnesses, midway into the 7-year period of the tribulation. Okay, so this is timing out perfectly. Halfway through the tribulation, we have a come up hither. Okay. Daniel 9:27, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. That's that 7-year period. And in the midst of the week, halfway, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of the abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. We do have these two people going up, or we do have them going into a cloud, yes. But other than that, is there anything else about a multitude of people for all nations, all kindreds and peoples and tongues to fit the kind of rapture we are looking for, like the 24 elders one? The two witnesses actually represent the Jewish line more and describes as being two olive trees. Seeing this represents original Israel, there might be a possibility of the 144,000 having been sealed and redeemed from the earth during the tribulation, as it states, but I could find no evidence of them being in heaven. Could they have been redeemed and not brought up, like filled with the Spirit, and they stayed on the ground to witness? Okay, I mean, who's going to witness to the people who were left on earth in 1,000 years? It could be them. I don't know. I may have missed something, so this is why I'm sharing all of this. In Revelation chapter 14, Jesus, the Lamb, is on Mount Zion, and the 144,000 are with him. Now the 144,000 are sealed in their foreheads in chapter 7. So between chapter 7 and 10, where that timeline ended, and now the chapter 14 timeline, there is no mention of them going up. It does state that they heard harpers harping from heaven, and they were singing a new song, and only the 144,000 could learn it. The 144,000 were on the ground with Jesus, and the song was coming from heaven. Does it mean that they were in heaven at the same time that they were with Jesus on the ground? If that is possible, or am I missing something? They could be the mid-trib rapture group. I am just not sure. But seeing as I have gone into this study, I wanted to present all cases for you to digest. They were redeemed as the first fruits. I see it as the original bloodline of ancient Israel grafted in that was foretold of a prophecy that you will see in a bit here, separated from their country and led away, but prophesied to return. And I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his father's name written in their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven as the voice of many waters, and as the voice of a great thunder. And I heard the voice of the harpers harping with their harps. And they sung, as it were, a new song before the throne, and before the four beasts and the elders. And no man could learn that song, but the 144,000, which were redeemed from the earth. Okay? There's chapter 14. They were redeemed from the earth, these 144,000. Excuse me. Okay, so these were redeemed from the earth. These are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb, whithersoever he goeth. These were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto God and to the Lamb. And when they had taken the book, the four beasts and 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, having every one of them harps and golden vials of odors, which are the prayers of the saints. Now, the elders in chapter 5 were given harps, but these harpers are harping in heaven before the throne, before the beasts and the elders. So it is inferring here that even though the elders have harps, they are hearing another group harping before them. And now we see that the 144,000, which, if you remember, that Israel was split into two nations, one part consisted of Judah and Benjamin, and the northern tribes of 10 consisted of the other part. They were scattered into all nations, and those 10 tribes didn't return. Only Judah with Benjamin and some Levites returned to their country and rebuilt. So the other 10 tribes were mostly dispersed across the lands. And now a few thousand years later, it would seem that to make up the 12,000 from each tribe that would contain the 144,000 sealed would indeed have to come from all nations, kindreds, tongues, and peoples. As being direct descendants of original Israel, they indeed would be the first fruits spoken of in many scriptures of returning to their father in the latter days, when finally reunited back with Judah and Benjamin. So they would be the first fruits of the Jewish nation, these 144,000. Isaiah 11:12, and he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. And I will cause the captivity of Judah and the captivity of Israel to return, and will build them as at the first. Jeremiah 50. In those days and in that time, saith the Lord, the children of Israel shall come, they and the children of Judah together, going and weeping. They shall go and seek the Lord their God. Okay, right now they're not seeking the Lord. Okay, they're just not. They don't believe in Jesus. On another side note, a rabbit trail within a rabbit trail, if you will, the tribulation is said to be 7 years by many because of the Daniel 9:27 verse and the 7-year peace treaty that will be signed with Israel, and this treaty is broken halfway through when the abomination of desolation occurs at the temple by the Antichrist. Then notice it speaks of a consummation at the end of it, which symbolizes the wedding night. Some say that the halfway part is when the Great Tribulation really gets kicking in, halfway through. So technically, from what I read, the Great Tribulation period lasts for two 42-month periods. Some say there is a regular tribulation during the 42 and a Great Tribulation during the second 42 months. Along that thinking path, then you can make a case for the mid-tribulation to actually be a pre-Great Tribulation rapture. Some also say that the second 42-month period is the time of wrath. So those people claim a mid-trib, pre-wrath rapture, but what I am finding here is that if there is a mid-trib rapture, it is looking like one specifically for the 144,000 sealed and redeemed by God from the 12 tribes of original Israel. I do have one other mid-trib scenario that I will share. John 6:16. And when the even was now come, his disciples went down into the sea. Evening started the new day, always evening, and then morning make up a day. It is for them the start of a big stormy day. And entered into a ship and went over the sea toward Capernaum, and it was now dark, and Jesus was not come to them. Symbolizes starting their walk with Jesus. They were heading home, and the darkness came. Tribulation had begun. And the sea arose by reason of a great wind that blew. A big storm during the tribulation period, very great wind. Remember the four winds where the elect are gathered. So when they had rowed about 25 or 30 furlongs, and they see Jesus walking on the sea and drawing nigh unto the ship, and they were afraid. The Sea of Galilee was what they were crossing, and note the length actually gets depicted here, not an amount of time, but a rough guess as to the length. Why? Well, 25 to 30 furlongs is about halfway from where they were to where they were going. Halfway, midway. Now it does say 25 to 30, so they could be about halfway, not exactly halfway. But he saith unto them, It is I, be not afraid. Then Jesus appears, all fear is gone. Then they willingly received him into the ship, and immediately the ship was at the land where they went. So they went through this storm. About halfway they see Jesus, they receive him, and immediately they were at the place where they were heading. It was their home base in Capernaum, home, heaven. Now I really like that possibility, that symbolism, but I cannot dig out much more than a possibility. Maybe you can, and you can reconcile everything else as well. Please let me know. There is probably something there that I am missing, and that is okay. I am willing to learn. If there is a mid-trib rapture, then that would make 4. I am just not all in on that one yet. End of rabbit trail, back to the rest of the pre-trib rapture proofs. Okay, let's get into stars. Now, let's look at these verses in chapter 12. Some people believe that this was depicting a set of signs in the stars, And those signs happened partially on September 23rd, 2017. In April 2014, September 2015, there were also a set of pre-warning signs to this in the sky as a series of 4 blood moons in a row all happened coinciding with the feast days. The constellations aligned for the 42 weeks prior to September 23rd. And you can watch some internet videos by a guy named Scott Clark who documented it all. He was so sure that this was possibly the sign of the pre-trib rapture. I think he was right about noticing the Revelation chapter 12 signs. He was just wrong in thinking that it was going to happen exactly on September 23rd. It was a sign indeed, but not completely fulfilled. But it was really good of him to let everyone know so we can add his work into our own as we learn and have more truths revealed. If you see trouble coming and you say nothing, even if it's not the event, if it could have been and you said nothing, then you failed to warn others. Let's look at Revelation 12. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pained to be delivered. The birthing pains coming near is a symbol of tribulation coming. Now, as for the rest of the verses, there is more to discern here that has not happened yet. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his head. This wonder in heaven has not happened yet as of 4/4/2020 that I'm aware of, but it refers to the devil coming on scene. And his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. The stars here are representing fallen angels who will be on the side of the devil during the Great Tribulation. And this is also a symbol of a star pattern revealed as a sign in the sky, heaven most likely. The 1/3 of stars fall right at the beginning when a pre-trib rapture would occur. But now look here at chapter 8 again during the 7th seal. During the 4th angel sounding his trumpet, we again have a 1/3 of the stars. Revelation 8. And the 4th angel sounded, and the 1/3 part of the sun was smitten, and the 1/3 part of the moon, and the 1/3 part of the stars, so as the 1/3 part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for a 1/3 part of it, and the night likewise. Revelation chapter 8 is not to the end of the Great Tribulation yet, but it's in the middle of it somewhere. But these stars mentioned here didn't fall. They were darkened, i.e., doing evil in the Great Tribulation. Now, about stars falling, here it is again right after the tribulation of those days. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Let's put all of this star stuff together now. Right around when there is supposed to be a pre-trib rapture, 1/3 of the stars fell. Okay, during the Great Tribulation, or in the middle of the tribulation, 1/3 of the stars were darkened. Okay, so if 1/3 fell, 1/3 are darkened, there's only 1/3 left. They did not fall, and at the very end of tribulation, immediately after, it said all the stars fall. Okay, so there's the last 1/3. Wow, huh? I find that just astounding, a coincidence of a sign, if you will. Raptures and stars have a connection. Signs in the heavens are there for a reason. And God said, Genesis 1:14, and God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons and days and years." I have thought about what the deceiver will say to the world when a bunch of people disappear. He is a liar, and there seems to be plenty of people working for him on the earth already as of the time of this writing. Media companies are controlled information, and they are owned by just a few people. It is easier than ever to push an agenda through the mainstream media, and now they are infiltrating many social networks as well and have many influencers there as well. What lies will be thrown out there to say what happened to the people who vanished? I can think of one offhand: aliens. At the exact time there's supposed to be a rapture, 1/3 of the stars, angels, fall to the earth. There's going to be all these angels down here on earth. How are they going to explain all of this? My answer: aliens. It's an educated guess, of course, but makes a lot of sense. I have not been given this from God, so don't sentence me for giving you this idea. I am just trying to say, hey, if this all happens and people do disappear, do you think the media will say, breaking news, today a few million people were believed to be raptured by Christ before the ushering in of the Great Tribulation? No, that is not going to happen. But whatever lies they say, I want you to be aware. There will be lies told to explain the truth that they don't want you to know about. Obviously, if you didn't make the first rapture and you're seeing people and you're left behind, there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. And the media is going to have all kinds of CGI stuff ready for it. They're going to have stuff that looks like alien ships looking real. I mean, I think they're gearing up for it now. Call me crazy. I'm just throwing this out. Otherwise, what are they going to use? I already see that they're working on some stuff in the backgrounds. I can see this build up to a lie coming. I can just see it, folks. So as I said, I didn't get a thus saith the Lord. They're going to use aliens. I'm guessing based on inferring what's going on. So I don't know. I mean, if a bunch of people disappear, how is the deceiver going to what's he going to say about that? What's what are they what are they going to say? They're not going to come and say the truth. They're going to have to make up something. They're already making up stuff. You would not believe what they're lying to you about. I'm not going to go into it right now, but oh my gosh. Oh, all right. Pre-tribulation case number 3, the woman and her seed. So we're going to look now at the rest of the chapter 12 verses and signs. And she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. Now these verses, up to 12:5, appear to be a symbol of Mary, the Virgin, who gave birth to Jesus, and who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And Jesus was indeed caught up to God after he rose from the dead and came out of the tomb. It is what a lot of websites believe and a lot of preachers preach as to the meaning of these verses. I mean a lot of them. And we do know this happened. And this very kind of thing in the stars is possibly what the wise men from the east saw about the birth of the king. But in the book of Revelation, these things are in the future, right? John is not seeing the past here of Jesus' birth, but of some story that is going to happen in the future. So what is the story saying? And right after this, in the next verse here, we see the woman fled into the wilderness for 3.5 years. Now what did not happen Now, that did not happen in Jesus' day. I mean, Christians did flee afterwards and were being persecuted, but it does not give any kind of specific time or reference for it being exactly 3.5 years right after Jesus was crucified. We then go into the book of Acts, and no mention there of 3.5 years either. So, what then is all this referring to? And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, and that they should feed her there 1,260 days. 1260. So if the woman's child in chapter 12:5 is not Jesus, then who is the child? This is in the future, around the time of tribulation, not 2,000 years ago. I am saying that the child that is caught up as soon as it's born is what is being symbolized as the timing of an event. I believe the event is the pre-tribulation rapture. The child then is a symbol of Christians. Then the woman went to a safe place in the wilderness prepared by God, which is a symbol of Israel in the past of when they were in the wilderness being fed manna from God when they left Egypt during the Exodus. But what does it mean for today, or rather in the tribulation? And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the face of the serpent. Who is this woman? What is she a symbol of? Notice the verbiage of woman here. It is not singular, as in the woman was, but they were given 2 wings. I believe the woman is the church. Others believe the woman represents Israel. Now, what Scott Clark had thought was that the sign in the heaven was the constellation Virgo, and the moon came into position at her feet, and some planets moved in and made a crown of 12 stars over her head. 9 stars are always there from the constellation Leo. 3 stars were added as wandering stars, other planets. Venus, Mercury, and Mars, I believe they were. And another wandering star, Jupiter, which is the king star that represents Jesus, was in the womb area of Virgo and completed a retrograde motion within her belly for 42 months and moved out of the womb, giving a perfect sign of a birth. Since this is not talking about Jesus back 2,000 years ago, and that it is referring to the future of things to come, Scott Clark believed that the child was a symbol of Christ, Christians, being raptured. I too believe this. But he believed that the rapture would happen September 23rd, the day that Jupiter came out of the womb. Obviously, this was not the date. And when this symbol of the child coming out of the womb happened on 9/23/17, to also point out that this was indeed a very significant event to see in the heavens, but also to take note of was the fact that it happened on the Feast of Trumpets. Now that's a big coincidence, or rather a sign from God. But I think what God does is he shows you a sign, and so you can get ready for it in the future. Because he was able to see this on a computer way ahead of time. People in, a small village in Africa looking up at the stars, figuring this stuff out, would see that and go, okay, it's sitting there, and oh, now it came out. Oh, how long was that? And they'd have to calculate, oh, that was about 9 months. That's a symbol of, okay, that'd be, pretty tough to figure out. And then by the time you figured it out, how would you be able to think about it and process that? If it just happened on that day, you'd have to be right on top of it. You wouldn't have time to think about it. Gosh, where did I leave off? Beast of Trumpets. That's a big coincidence. I forget. Now he was able to take a computer program and see this happen by advancing the days and watching what the stars would do and when they would do it. Someone just looking up at the sky would not have been able to see that. For instance, I just can't look up at the sky and guess what will be there in a week from now. And when they saw it happen, if it meant the rapture right then and now, not many people would have been able to figure that out. And second, we are not supposed to know the day or the hour. Even though the rapture did not happen on that date, I still believe he is on to something. This was a pretty huge deal. But since the rest of the signs didn't happen yet, that is most likely why the rapture hasn't happened yet. I do believe, though, that it is telling us, get ready. It is getting close. But the fact that it happened on the Feast of Trumpets, that body coming out on the Feast of Trumpets, I think that's the sign we're looking for. And that could possibly lead us to a day, couldn't it? I don't know what day, but that could possibly lead to the day of the Feast of Trumpets. And is the Jewish calendar correct? I don't believe that it is. The months might be right, but I don't think the Hebrew calendar year is correct. And if you looked at my other book too, I just kind of get into that a little bit with this other book that I've got from Frank Klassen called The Chronology of the Bible by Frank Klassen. So anyway, mini rabbit hole here. Remember we talked about the stars falling, and during the Great Tribulation, 1/3 of the stars fall to Earth. Is it possible that the signs in the stars, according to the rest of Revelation 12, might happen when those stars are removed? Would that change the constellations? Yes, it would. I don't know. It is just another thought is all. So what does the rest of the woman's story in the heavens mean? Here is my theory. I believe that the woman is the church. The woman was ready to give birth, going through some labor pains right before the birth. And that symbolizes the coming rapture. When the woman gives birth, the times are getting pretty bad. The child, Christians, are raptured. The woman then is carried off for 42 months. So this symbolizes the church is now in the wilderness. All the Christians are gone. If you are a new Christian coming into your belief in God at this point in time, you're not going to be able to go to a church down the street like we can. This is all going to be different. It represents that there is no one going to any of the regular churches at this time, and to the church, or current concept of church as we know it, will change into an underground church. And during this 42-month period of new converts and new saints coming to Christ through a network of wilderness churches, this is where the tribulation saints come from. After 42 months, that protection ends. Satan is loosed and tries to flush her out with a flood, but the earth swallows up the flood. The earth symbolizes the underground. Since the church was raptured and the church is hidden, Satan then makes war with the remnant Christians, which is still the seed of the church, but a smaller portion, because that is all he can find, and they are dispersed all over in smaller pockets, i.e. remnant. That is my theory, and what do you think? We're going to go ahead and cut her out right now. This will be the end of part 5. We're going to get into cases number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Keep going in the next chapter, so you're going to get more proofs. So here we've talked about stars. We've got the Revelation 12 sign. It doesn't mean Jesus. A lot of people think that was Jesus, but it can't. John is being shown the future. He's not being shown 90 years ago. This is probably in the year, well, it could have been in the years 60s up to 90s. So he's not being shown 60 years ago. He's being shown, almost 2,000 years in the future. This is what he's seeing. So anyway, hope you come back for part 5, and God bless. See you next time.